I've seen people of all ages and all body sizes feel more at home, knowing this is it. This is my body and this is my life. And I think this is what is so beautiful, that's what feels right.
Welcome back to another episode of Voices of the Goddess, where brilliant women come to take a break from their successful and sometimes overwhelming lives to level up, live free, and create abundance.
If your hectic life has you feeling a bit lost, if you're building your career, brand, or business, or if you simply want to get the most out of life, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Galina Denzel, founder of Body and Soul PT and Soul Candy.
And I'm your co-host, Graciela Laurent, professional portrait photographer specializing in boudoir and personal branding.
Whether you're relaxing with a cup of coffee or running around town, we've got you.
Whatever you're doing, thanks for bringing us along and sharing a laugh.
Here comes the magic.
Whoop whoop! This party started! I always envision people going on walks listening to us first thing in the morning and us starting off going whoop whoop! Sorry, hopefully that wasn't too loud.
Like, if you get your earbuds in, like, make sure you got it turned down.
Yeah. Put it on Cuban volume, you know? It means you turn it down a little bit because my voice is going to compensate for
And
that.
that's funny because I have, like, I listen to podcasts. I'm, like, out there, like, doing the research, seeing what other people are putting out there. And there's one. So I'm in BNI, Business Networking International, the cult of it, if for those who don't know. And they have a couple podcasts that I listen to because we have to get CEU credits, you know. And one of them has like the most obnoxious, loud music that starts the show. And if I'm thinking about it, I'll turn it down. But sometimes, like, they play automatically because of how I have it set up in my phone.
Sure.
I feel like I want to write the guy and be like, dude, turn down your opening music. It's too much for me.
So, you know, I use Siri a lot, right? And I dictate into my phone and my phone types things out for me and Siri makes phone calls for me and sends text messages for me and all of that. But I forget that if you ask Siri to make a phone call using like speaker, like talking to your phone in front of you, she replies to you and she says, dialing, da 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 da, like she confirms what she's doing, but she does it so loud, and inevitably I forget, and I put the phone up to my ear because I'm ready for the phone call, and it just like blasts. But like I know I've lost hearing on this side just because of me getting Siri to make my phone calls for me. Like if I'm wearing headphones, it doesn't happen, but when I do it, like just holding it like on speaker, man, woo, that is no joke.
Anyway, she seems like a good assistant, though. I hope you pay her well.
As a matter of fact, she's probably going to be begging me for money now because I still have the iPhone 10 and I'm not intending on buying a new one. I don't know what number they're up to now, like 47 or whatever. It's fine.
I think the 15 just came out, maybe. But I'm not that techy.
I can tell shit's happening because it's like draining my battery, but I'm like, I don't care. I will plug in. I'm not learning new things right now. Like, no, I need a minute. But speaking of learning new things, you know, I have to share because, you know, I love taking classes and I love going to events and stuff. And so recently I went to Phoenix for a whole week and I did a whole photography conference. And, you know, sometimes like when I go to photography conferences or I read books or some stuff, like I'm old now, right? So like I've done a whole lot of this stuff and I've been doing specialty photography for 10 years. Sometimes I walk in and I'm like, oh yeah. I already do that. Like I'm eager, ready to write stuff down, but I'm like, man, there's nothing new here, you know? But then I always think to myself, like, okay, let me just stay open. What can I see that maybe, you know, this was presented to me 5 years ago and I wasn't ready to do it. And maybe now I am. Like, where can I find the wisdom, you know? Being that I'm not a beginner any longer, you know? And it was actually really cool. There were not just photographers who photographed celebrities, but photographers who were celebrities just because their work is so like world famous. And I'm telling you, like, I think I'm a pretty successful photographer. Like I have a pretty good business. And then you watch some of these people that shoot celebrities and I'm like, damn, oh my God, that's incredible. Right. So anyway, and speaking of Siri, I had to take notes on my phone because of course I didn't bring a little journal. And yeah, so I know
you have a million journals, didn't bring a journal.
No, because I thought they were going to give you one. Like when you go to it's like they give you the journal and the pen, but they didn't have one this time. So I was like, what? Wait, now what do I do? So I took notes like a millennial. I don't know how y'all do it. But you know what? I brought it up because I know some of the stuff that we talk about here, you might feel like, oh, I know this. I already know this. I've heard this before. But sometimes it just hits a little bit different, you know? Sometimes you just hear the message from a different person, and for some reason, that's the day that it clicks, you know?
Yeah, I can relate to this a lot. You know, as a physical therapist, I've had to do CEUs, and 30 plus years into, you walk into even just looking for a class that I want to take has been a challenge. And but this weekend I got initiated into the mystery schools, which is all spiritual training. And as you called me out a couple weeks ago or something, that I'm like always searching for more. There I was searching for more, but there was also the piece of the ego side of Julietta, like, yeah, what are they going to teach me that I don't already know? And I also checked myself at the door and said, just be open. And even if they are sharing with you things that you've already learned, they might have a different way of saying it, that it's going to settle in a little differently. You might understand it at a deeper level. Because obviously I'm missing something, because I'm still here. I haven't enlightened and gone poof and disappeared yet. So there's always more to learn. And we talk about this too. Like, we have all these different guests on. Sometimes they're sharing the same message, but in their own voice, in their own words, from their own experience. And it's going to resonate differently for different people. And there's always something more to learn.
Absolutely. I love it. So who are we learning from today?
This amazing woman I was telling you earlier, like her Facebook post, just like, I just feel them in my heart. And I was like, we got to have her on the show. So here she is, the amazing Galina. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. What?
She's got it. All right.
Oh, it's so good to be with you.
We are so happy you're here. And I know who you are, and Graciela kind of knows who you are, but I would love for you to introduce yourself to our audience. Tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what keeps you passionate about that.
Oh, what lifts the covers up in the morning? I am in Longmont, Colorado right now. It's where I've lived for the last 5 years. My name is Galina, clearly. Denzel is my last name. And I'm originally from Bulgaria, which is what you hear in my voice. People always like, what is this? Where are you from? We can't place you. I've been in the States for about 12 years now, became a citizen this year.
Hi, congratulations.
I'm going to vote. I'm here to vote. And what I do every day is I work with people and small groups as a somatic practitioner to support them through their winding path and complicated relationship with food. I think what I have found in the years that I've been doing this, specifically working with food mostly in the last 5 years, prior to that I was mostly working with chronic pain and syndromes, finding that there isn't a single person who doesn't have a complex relationship with food, female or male. And while most of the people who seek me out are female, only about maybe 5-6% are male statistically. It's beautiful work, and I'm really blessed to do it. Really blessed to be able to combine working with the body, movement, somatic practices. I'm a somatic experiencing and NARM and somatic practice practitioner, and just this yearning to become more of who we are and move through what's in the way to us becoming who we are. And what keeps me passionate is that I work with real people, really people whose lives are so beautiful and so complex that I could probably, as a writer, write a book on each of the people I work with every day. I wish they had that kind of time. I taught a retreat recently in California, and my retreat students made a book out of the retreat and actually published it and sent me a copy.
Oh, wow.
And it was so cool. And one of the things I thought of during the retreat was, what if every retreat had a writer that sat there and just took notes and, took note of the practices we're doing and the stories that are shared and all the different ways that we move through challenges together and the beautiful meals we have and the ritual. How could it be to have a retreat writer? And
I think you just found my new career. I love this idea.
I know, right?
That's amazing.
And they made a book about it. And this kind of ability to combine music and movement and art and poetry and nervous system somatic work as people move through their trauma imprints, it's just so beautiful. So I feel really blessed.
I love that. And one thing, as you were speaking, this hit me really hard because this morning I was on the Facebook and there was this post that like really triggered me. Just what comes from you. And I mean, food is such an area of, I can't even put to words, like our relationship as humans with food can be so traumatic and shameful and all of these things. And people are judged and shamed so much. And someone like posted this picture. Someone in their family had been in the hospital and was taking a picture and commenting on how many people in the hospital working, the healthcare practitioners, are fat, and just like really shaming them. And this person is a healthcare practitioner themselves. And I'm like, I feel like we need so much more compassion in healthcare and understanding. And this was, has been a part of my journey as well. Knowing that a lot of the weight that I carry is protecting me from everything that I'm exposed to with my clients all day. And I've done a lot of journey, and I'm actually considering reaching out to you, Galina, and to maybe, because people have watched what I eat and they're like, I don't understand why you are the size that you are, because it doesn't match with what you're putting in your mouth. And I recognize that there's a missing piece to what's going on here. And so for everybody out there to just judge people for being the wrong weight, and especially if you're a healthcare provider, like people who aren't the right weight don't need to be judged and shamed. And your posts always just come from such a place of love and support. And I feel like the world needs so much more of that. And so I just want to acknowledge you for that and let that message out there for people who are listening, like, where's that judgment coming from?
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're speaking about what got touched and awakened inside of you as you read that, I always think about this is on the cultural level, but culture is made of people. And on the fractal level, each of us is what makes culture. And so what is unresolved inside somebody who openly judges and shames someone else, the way out of the cultural kind of bind and how we're bound by culture is actually that each person becomes free in their own self. And that's personal work. Like, it can't be done from the outside in. It has to be done from the inside out. What's really shocked me is when I wrote my book about the trauma healing approach to emotional eating that I teach, it's called Peace with Self, Peace with Food. I wrote it for people who have no idea they have a nervous system. I wrote it for people who have no clue that the way they eat and the way they were raised and the way they developed in utero are connected. And I expected that when people reach out and write me an email or come to a consultation or come to work with me, that there'll be people who have no clue. And who's actually coming is mostly providers. People who are, PTs and OTs and therapists and counselors, and people who say, hey, I've struggled with this my whole life. I've struggled with food my whole life. And I'm in this helping space, just like you are, Julieta, that I'm with people all day long and all I do is give. All I do is give. And there's this imbalance between giving and actually being able to be nourished that I'm seeing in so many practitioners that I work with. And if you work in a hospital setting, there's no amount of time spent with those lights, with those sounds, with those unpredictable events that is in any way regulating and supportive for the nervous system. So what kind of personal support do you need for yourself in order to balance out your vocation and your calling? It's a big deal. Actually, the people that we applauded during the pandemic in New York from the balconies, they're still out there and nobody's applauding them right now, you know? And what somebody in healthcare has to go through on a daily basis is unspeakable. And so all of that, and it's easy to judge when you yourself are in that space, I think, and you haven't resolved what that means.
So what does it look like for someone to work with you? Is it like, what's the most common thing that people come to you with? The first thing that they say to you?
First thing people usually say is food has my life. Most of my thoughts, most of my worries are either about food or my body, one or the other. And oftentimes people will come in their 60s and their 70s. I have quite a few students in their 70s with just this sense of like, there's got to be a way out. Like, this can't be what I'm thinking about. This can't be what I'm doing with my life. And some people have been everywhere and done everything, as you can imagine. By the time you're 60, 70, you can write 10 books about it. I wrote one. And there's this lack of understanding, I think, culturally, how much of this is preverbal, precognitive, how much of this is set preconception, at conception, in utero, during birth, and the very, very tender time after. And so I find as people take a workshop with me, or even just read my book or listen to a podcast like yours, which is, I'm so grateful to be able to speak with you today, that it just helps them understand and shame themselves less. And it helps them have a little opening of, oh, maybe I'm not the problem. Maybe what I'm seeing is just adaptations. Kind of like when you see a tree that's grown around a nail or around a post or around a bicycle. You ever see those trees I love those trees that grow around a bike or around a lamppost. That's just, I just grew around this thing that happened to me or didn't happen to me, as a lot of early trauma is what didn't happen, not what happened.
So I presume the work that you're doing is showing why it's so hard to get started with changing your body shape, right? Like, everyone knows, quote unquote, that it's, eat healthier, move your body. That's the basic bottom line formula, right? But sometimes it's so overwhelming to just even get started. And like you said, there's a lot of guilt and shame layers in there. Like, so-and-so did it, why can't I just do it? And I love that you're explaining that some of that you weren't even aware of, that it was happening to you, right? Like, it's not your fault.
No, not at all. And, I'm imagining Julieta knows this very well, and maybe you do as well, Graciela, that the nervous system is always watching out for our protection and our survival. And if you think about something like changing your body shape, and most people, even though I work with quite a few people who are underweight, but most people want to be in a smaller body, that means that the life force in your system is moving and it's not bound for protection. Like what we know as the freeze response. That if a system is wired for protection through the freeze, collapse, fawn, all of this is in your actual nervous system. These responses are mediated by nerves that are making your metabolism go this way or that way. That if you decide on top of your frozen assets that you're going to make an investment, that you can't, that they're bound in a bank account that you can't touch. It's kind of like trying to tube. Here in Colorado, we have a lot of tubing down the rivers. It's like trying to tube down a frozen river. You cannot. That water has to warm up and it has to start to flow in order for it to move. And for human beings, that water, that river thaws out in relationship. So if I'm going to move out of my freeze response adaptation, it has to happen in relationship. But relationship is what made me go there. So I don't trust relationships. So the very thing that's going to help me thaw out coming into a relationship with a touch practitioner, with a very attuned body worker, with somebody like Julieta, that's going to have hands on me or is going to be in my presence for hundreds of hours until my system goes, okay, maybe it's safe to thaw out. That very thing I'm terrified by. And so you see how we can try to diet on top of this. But food is really low on the totem pole of what keeps us moving as human beings. Connection is the highest thing. And so until I've resolved my connection adaptations and how I relate to myself and to others, I might not get to this food piece, which is why it's hard to have a diet past Wednesday, you know. Mm-hmm. Once people start to see how their energy is bound in self-protection, and they can start to open up into a relationship little by little, sometimes just with professionals in the beginning, and over time with people out in the wild, things get better, things get easier. But nobody has an disordered eating without some sort of relational challenge that happened early on.
I'm like, how can I talk? I'm sitting here processing what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important for people to hear this because, again, and even Graciela, in your question earlier, like you can see, like we've all been programmed to believe that it's just simply calories in, calories out. Mm-hmm. And speaking as someone who, throughout my whole life, I've always been bigger than what society deems I should be. And there have been so many times in my life that I have done everything, quote unquote, right about eating and exercise. Mm-hmm. And both individually and with professional help, and monitoring everything that went into my body and everything that went out of my body, and have just viewing such a minimal change with all of that effort that I put in. And I reached the point that I was like, okay, this obviously isn't the answer, and I'm done, and I just don't care anymore, and I'm just going to be me. And then I did a lot of work on loving this size body that I have, which I mostly do now, but also as I'm aging and realizing too that age is a real thing too. Like, even though my face doesn't necessarily look 55, sometimes in the mornings my body does feel 55. And, it's like, okay, I got to do something here because I don't want to be feeling this unhappy in my body. Like, I want to be happy in my body if I'm going to be here. But
I think that's an important distinction to talk about how you feel in your body versus what size you are. And I would be curious, Galina, your thoughts on that. Like, being of a certain size shouldn't carry judgment with it. And also, for me personally, it's less about the number on the scale and more about how I feel in my body. Mm-hmm. Just curious about that side.
Well, how you feel in your body is an interesting thing, right? And this is where this whole idea of body image is in as well, which is how you see yourself in your body. Because how you feel in your body is not just light, flowy, heavy, buzzy, charged, collapsed, contracted, open. It's also sad and hopeless and terrified. And because the interoceptive system, which is the system that tells us how we feel, are you thirsty, hungry, sleepy, horny? Do you have to go to bed? Or do you want an apple or some kimchi? That system is the same system tells us about bodily states and bodily needs and emotional states and emotional needs. And so if in my body I feel like I'm all alone and nobody's coming, and I'm terrified of that aloneness, then it might be very hard to know whether I'm hungry or not every time I'm bored. And so how you feel in your body is so much about the emotions that you're disconnected or connected to. And what I find is no matter what size body you're in, that reconnecting with your emotional body so that you can be in your physical body is a critical part of the path so that you can feel better. Because what feels bad, there's nothing bad about fat per se. Like when I've been more heavy, the world was more muffled through this much of a layer of fat. The world felt more muffled. there wasn't as much sensitivity in some of my tissues, but there was nothing bad per se about the fat tissue itself. What felt bad were the emotions that were in my body at the same time. And so I'm finding people of all sizes, because if you've been in a large body most of your life, the chances you're going to be in a small body in your late 70s, I don't know if it'll happen for most people, because there's so many metabolic adaptations by that time. And I don't know if the same value will be somebody in the late 70s applies the same value to what their body looks like when they're 20. It's just, there's so many different ways that we relate. But I've seen people of all ages and all body sizes feel more at home, knowing this is it. This is my body and this is my life. And I think this is what is so beautiful, that's what feels right, because we don't have another physical vessel. This is it. And if we were meant to come as feathers or roses or something else, we would have, but we're a lot more complex than that. I don't know if this answers the question, but a poor attempt at answering a very complex question.
I think that was good. As I was listening to you speak, it was also something that I've been contemplating quite a bit lately, is the English language. And so you being English, I assume, is not your first language.
No. Yeah.
In most other cultures, when they refer to things, they don't say I am. In English, we say I am hungry, I am sad, I am happy. And in other cultures, you don't say that in other languages. And so it's more I feel or I have. And I think that's something, we were talking on another episode, the power of words and saying them out loud. And so when we say these things all the time, we give power to them. Mm-hmm. And so I personally am working on changing my language. And so mm-hmm. instead of telling someone that I'm hungry, I'm going to say I feel hungry, or I have hunger at this moment. And, if I feel sad, I feel sad. I'm not sad. I'm not a sad person, but sometimes I feel sad. Yeah. And,
well, this is fascinating, because I actually went to school to be an English teacher. I went to school for linguistics and what's called British and American Studies in Bulgaria. And so you either become a translator or an English teacher, or you stay in academia if you have no self-preservation instincts. And I've thought about this a lot, like the language and the power of language. And English is a surprisingly easy language to make shortcuts, to make things very easy, very fast. You can make up things on the go, like I feel okay-ish, and somehow everybody understands what you mean. And that same brevity and efficiency also makes us not specific. Like when people say I'm anxious, and I teach my students, this is meaningless information. Let's find out what's under it. Because I'm anxious can be one of 1,000 things. Let's find out how you actually feel right now. And so them learning to say, I feel activated, I notice it in my chest, and I notice it in my stomach, and my head's a little floaty, is a lot more specific than I'm anxious. And then we can see what's under the activation. Is it that you were unkind to yourself today, or somebody else was unkind to you? We don't know, but we are going to find out.
And I think there's so much healing in that self-awareness, right? Because those words aren't as judgy as the other words, and they're also not as black holes as those other words, right? Like,
yep.
Declaring that you are XYZ, like whenever I refer people to Julietta, I always say, if you feel like, oh, this is just how I am, you need to go see Julietta, because there's no such thing. There's no such thing of, oh, but I'm just this type of person. Like, I'm not that type of person. I'm this type of person. And, you keep limiting yourself, right? Over and over again. You don't even realize it.
Yeah. Every day. And you realize it and you're like, oh, here I did it again, and hopefully you learn how to laugh about it.
Yeah. So what is a book that you might recommend to our readers? And I heard you say you had your book, so I hope you share that one as well.
Yeah. I would say I'm really passionate about women learning about the nervous system and about what it means to live in a human body that's also hundreds of thousands of years old and shares a lot with the animal world. And of course, I'll recommend my book, Peace with Self, Peace with Food. I think it's a great guide for anybody who has a complex relationship with food or anybody who has parents. But I believe there's a book by Kimberly Ann Johnson called Call of the Wild. And Kim is a somatic experiencing practitioner, colleague, and also somebody I highly respect in the field of trauma and healing for women. So I would say if you feel ready to embody more of your nature as a woman, The Call of the Wild is a beautiful book.
That is a new book on our list.
Yay!
I was laughing because we sometimes talk about, oh, should we take this question out of what we ask? And because we think that we're going to just start getting repeats of the same books. And our guests never fail us. They keep bringing us new books to add on the list. So
I love that.
Yes. So the show has, I hope a lot of people listen and start rethinking about how they think about their relationship with food and the relationship with their bodies. And, but I'm curious if you have some other nugget to share with our audience, a parting gift for them.
Well, when you struggle with food, it feels like it's never going to get better. And it feels like it's never going to change. And I want to say that while that feels true, it's not. But change may look very different than you imagined.
I love that. I tell people all the time, like, whatever it is that you think you want, release the expectation of what that looks like. Because what you want could come in a completely different package than the one that you've structured in your mind of what it's supposed to look like. And what you actually get is more likely going to be way more than you even expected that you were going to receive. So,
oh, what a beautiful invitation.
That's what I was just going to say. This show felt like a hug.
Oh, thank you.
It's such a pleasure having you on, Galina, and I hope you will join us in the Circles of the Goddess Facebook group. I would love to continue this conversation, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners would the same. Let's have a conversation, guys. Let's open it up and let's bring things up. What's going on for you and how do you feel? And what do you think about what Galina said today? Whether it's an agreement or whether you're butting up against something and you're feeling some resistance in your body, let's talk about it, because if you feel it, chances are someone else feels it too. And this is how we rise together.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today. This has been beautiful. And thank you to our listeners for listening. And I want to wish everybody a magical day.
Thanks for joining us today and keeping us in the top 10% of podcasts in the world.
Ask us how you can promote your business on this podcast as a sponsor, and make sure you check out the show notes for details on how to get in touch with Julieta, Graciela, or today's special guest.
We're sending you lots of love and gratitude. Have a magical day.